And and Nicole was one of my first clients, and in fact, I had mixed three of her uh, feature-length documentaries. So when she was wrapping up her last one at the time, a really good documentary called Revolutionary Optimists, I took her to lunch because I've been mixing all these documentaries, and I rarely ever see a documentary about disability, especially in a way that I would, um, you know, there are so many stories here that weren't being told. I took her to lunch, pitched her some ideas, but literally kind of can't believe this, but on the way back to the building from the restaurant, it's like, I've always wanted to see a documentary about my summer camp. I think there's a really important story of these people moving from New York out to Berkeley and a connection to the disability rights movement. And so, to try to make a long story short, I had sent her to a Facebook page with a ton of black and white photographs, a lot of those you see in the documentary. And she became really kind of like, say, I like this. I like the joy I'm seeing. Um, and and basically she said yes, but let's make the film together, and which was a huge honor uh, to me, only because I just think she's a really great filmmaker, but I'm untested. I mean, I know a lot of folks, and I've mixed tons of documentaries, but here we are. But yet the collaboration we had was so important, and fortunately, we were really able to craft it in that. Um, I knew the community. I knew a lot of the people you see in this film, and and our and her vantage point of not being from the disability community, but yet kind of who she is as a person and a filmmaker. We had a really excellent partnership, and I mean, I could certainly go in deeper into that, but I'm going to keep going. The black and white video footage was made by this group called the People's Video Theater. And this was like the early days of portable video. I mean, it was a big kind of uh, uh, tape deck that, like, you had like a shoulder strap to carry, and this camera with a big thick cable. And they happened to bump into some people from Camp Shannon at a gas station in Catskill, New York. And it was kind of like, well, who are you? Who are you? Blah, blah, blah. Why don't you come and film our Camp Olympics? And so when they show up, at first they couldn't get in. And it's because the whole crab thing was going on. And so, welcome to Camp Jeanette. Find yourself at Camp Jeanette. So, but I remembered that they gave me the camera one day to do a tour of the camp. But the only thing I remembered was the word people. And Nicole spent about 3 months scouring the internet at night after she was like done with her work on Revolutionary Optimists. Finally found a recently digitized video magazine, or from back in the day, ad on the back that said crab epidemic at Camp Jeanette for the handicap 695 People's Video Theater. So anyway, um, we traced one of the people from the People's Video Theater, Howard Gutstadt, who you see in the film. As it turns out, he lived in San Francisco, and we met with him, and it was an amazing, amazing meeting, because like their whole thing was trying to take this new technology and to use it as a tool for staff or other people. Just and they were really documenting a lot of stuff down in Greenwich Village. So anyway, we were able to help pay for. Um, they had just started getting these tapes digitized, but didn't have all the money, so we were able to give them the money to finish that and to license the footage.
Um, was there anything that was not included in the final cut of Crip Camp that you wish had been left in?
Yeah, there were a few things. Lionel, the counselor from Alabama, I think more of his story it would have been nice. There was more of Denise Jacobson's story, Denise being part of the couple from Oakland. Just and there was this thing we had built around when I got my first car, my Vista Cruiser station wagon, and that sense of freedom and being out in the world anonymously because nobody knew I had a disability behind the wheel, or the freedom to go out after the first snowfall, look at all the trees without having to try to roll a wheelchair through that or to be reliant on anybody else. So I mean, those are just some of the stories. I'm it was a struggle to get it down to 100 minutes, and you know, the Netflix wanted 90, but we landed on a really good cut.
Why did you include the word crip in the title, and why use a term that some might find derogatory today?
Well, it is a term that has a lot of different meaning for me and a lot of other people. The intent, I think, when it started being used in conversation was simply to kind of reclaim the word cripple, which is derogatory. And look, not everybody, like you said, not everybody really likes this term, but in way of context, Corbett O'Toole, who you see in the film, said, you know, years ago, we've been friends for decades. She, you know, asked me, "Hey, did you go to Crip Camp?" And when she first said that to me, it was like, "Oh, I get it. You want to know whether I went to a camp for people with disabilities, right?" It's also kind of symbolic of people who politically identify and people that identify culturally and politically with disability rights and disability justice. And so, um, you know, there's Crip Lit. You know, I joked that when we had a screening at MoMA in New York City, that all the Cripperati were there from New York, and some of us also, at times when we are in community or needing a certain amount of emotional support from other people with disabilities, we kind of affectionately call them our Crip fam. And I think that on the Crip Camp, yeah, on the Crip Camp website, I think we have a link to Alice Wong's talking about why uh, in the hashtag Crip the Vote, why they use the word Crip.
Thank you. Yeah. And maybe we could put the website up on the chat. That might be good, like to the film.
Yeah, cripcamp.com.
Okay, that's easy. So next question. How do you think social media has impacted the notion of what it means to be disabled or the movement in general?
It's a really good question. The accessibility of social media for any community has enabled people to tell their own stories or to bring up their own issues, and certainly people with disabilities and what you kind of gathered from television or film or really even the news was really through the lens of people without disability. They thought that they knew where the stories were or felt safe repeating the same stories of tragedy or heroicism. And so social media has really just broadened the accessibility for people to see other folks with similar situations, but also people without disabilities to get a much better and realistic and authentic view of what disability really means. And it is not a community that wants to die or be euthanized. We are not a community that is unrealistically angry, but we are, some of us. And you know, the thing about Crip Camp was that people were surprised at how joyful the film was. And it's like, well, there you go. And so this is so anyway, I think that it's really, really helped. I reluctantly use Twitter as a way to kind of do the advocacy work that I'm doing. I just recently became aware of an alternative space called Blue Sky.
So the next question we have is, What first comes to mind when you envision disability?
No one's ever asked me that question, Carrie. So so yay. Uh, when I hear the word, I get an image of someone with a disability in my head. It may not necessarily be precisely somebody I know, but I see a human being. And I see a human being for which, if I look carefully, I might see an indication of a disability. And so I guess I think I want to encapsulate this just a little bit better. I don't see a wheelchair. I don't see um, a hospital or a IV line. I see a person. And when Nicole and I were making the film, we had a couple of different, little post-its up around the editing screen and stuff. But on I guess it was on our, index, you do this like wall of index cards so you can move things around and stuff. But on that was the word community. And in fact, we're fortunate enough to have a convening with a bunch of amazing folks. It's going to be for the film, because hand in hand with most documentaries is a campaign to help leverage what you've just been working your fanny off for years. And we thought it might have been about voting rights or something, and the message, which was loud and clear, was create community, support community. We really did that. And in fact, if I could just tell you a story here for a second. So Crip Camp was released on Netflix right at the beginning of the pandemic shutdown. Great timing. But yet it actually wound up being a plus. We had handed our impact campaign to two women that were deeply embedded in disability justice, and Andrea Levant and Stacy Milburn. Their idea was that we'd try to have some convenings in person with some of the OGs like me and Corbett and Judy, with some younger activists. That would be a really good thing to do. And so when that became impossible to do because of sheltering in place and such, first somebody says, well, I guess we have to wait a year. And they went, no, we got this. And so what wound up happening is that we had a summer it was scheduled for 16 weeks, but Sunday afternoon virtual Crip camps where people could get on Zoom, and we'd have two topics, and it was remarkable. We originally thought, well, how many people are going to get to show up? And as it turned out, that we started off with about actually 500 people kind of registering to be there, and by the end of the summer we had 10,000 people and from all over the world. And the subjects were everything from sexuality to what is disability justice, self-care. I effed up, now what do I do? So I think the point that I just really and by the way, there is a way to access these videos for almost all of these on our website, and I'm almost 90% positive. But anybody who emails info@cripcamp.com will get an auto response that provides a lot of information. So anyway, those Sundays are available on YouTube.
So next question. Have you noticed in the past or present a hierarchy of disabilities within the disability community?
Yeah, I mean, Denise Jacobson brings that up in our film, this hierarchy of disability. And in fact, I'm hoping that a lot of folks have seen the film that are with us today. But, Neil Jacobson, who unfortunately passed away a few months ago, he gets two of the biggest laughs in the film. And he tells this story that is when he told his mother that he and Denise were going to get married, and her mom said, well, I understand why you want to marry someone with a disability, but couldn't you have chosen a polio? So it was Yeah, and so indeed, first off, I think all of everybody I know, including myself, has had a certain amount of internalized ableism, and I think it's important that people are honest about that, because when you are honest or recognize something within yourself, it is a place to start to change. And so, and I have this conversation once in a while. It's really interesting. And so I think that there are certain things that are difficult for people and that might present a hierarchy. And a lot of that has to do with disability affected speech and how hard it may be to understand someone or communicate. And, but I think that the hierarchy is something that is more than likely not nearly as prevalent as it used to be. I think at one point, especially during the whole thing around 504, people are saying, well, can you at least do this for the blind community? Can you at least do this? And so the fact that so many organizations came together at that point as a unified front was very, very important. And uh, so is it still there? I'm sure in any community there is, but it's not nearly as prevalent as it was. And again, when we see films or learn about people, I can give you one example here is there's a New York Times op doc that just won a News Emmy Award a couple of weeks ago called My Disability Roadmap. And it's made by Dan Habib and his son Samuel. And Samuel has a relatively rare I always do that, genetic condition, and he's unable to speak. So he uses a Toby, which is augmented, I forget the term, but forgive me for that. But and they're finishing a feature-length version of this documentary right now. And I think that one of the things I love about it is you do see a breadth of people with various different disabilities. And somehow I'm trying to tie this together in saying that I think that it's somehow there's no hierarchy among the people that we see in this film. And I think the same thing holds true with Crip Camp. And so, what is the through line on all of that? I think it's the opportunity to really hear people in their own voice, whatever that definition really is, and that they had an opportunity, the space, the time, the assistance to really be heard. So we're just amazing.
Who are some people that you admire?
Well, I'm really fortunate that Judy Human was a friend for most of my life, and we became much more connected and closer when Nicole and I started working on Crip Camp. She was the first interview that we did. We went to Washington when she was still at the State Department. And so I really, the other people I really admire or look up to, Alice Wong, who lives in San Francisco, who started a website called the Disability Visibility Project, who has authored a number of books, including a memoir, has given the community so much in the way of resource, community, and an extraordinary way to really embrace disability as something that isn't something to be ashamed of. It is not less than. Irene, you probably would. I heard a term about a year ago that might come to you. It's not hearing loss, it's deaf gain.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And there are many disability gains for a variety of disabilities.
Exactly. Well, Neil Marcus, who was a performance artist, I believe I attribute this to him, said, disability is an ingenious way to live. So I really look up to not just the artists and filmmakers, Jen Brea, who made a documentary called Unrest, and Jason De Silva, who made a film called When I Walk. These were folks who were really starting this wave of documentary filmmakers. Anyway, those are just a few of the people that come to mind. But and I had an opportunity to go to the White House, and there was a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Rehab Act of 1973. And it was that act for which the 504 demonstrations were all about. And it was also a celebration of the 33rd anniversary of the ADA. And look, I really look up to President Biden and everybody. And I just want to say this. Look, politically, this is not the discussion that I'm not leaning into policy here. I'm just leaning into a person who had to deal with his stutter, and I don't like the term overcoming. I just think that he lives with his stutter, and I know he worked hard for that, and that to put yourself out in public and to be empathetic or to try to do the right thing, I just really I got to shake hands with him and be there for what he said, and it just made me reevaluate him or just really appreciate him more. So anyway, there's your answer.
You mentioned Judy Human and that you've had a long history with her. What were your first impressions of the late great Judy Human? And did you predict at the time what a force she would become in the disability rights movement?
I was 15 at Camp Jeanette when I met her. So, and I have to say that, Camp Jeanette, like the fact that there were counselors with disabilities, which equals like, oh my gosh, somebody with a disability who has a job, who has a responsibility, who is in leadership, was like, wow, that's amazing. But look, Judy was so charismatic and a true personality, but challenging. That I was bowled over. Plus, being 15 years old, I thought she was really beautiful. Let's just leave that there on the table. And but there's no way I could have predicted this. What I did know was that she had prevailed in her fight to get her teacher's license. And for me, that was so motivating because I realized what we could actually fight back. We weren't, there were no protections of any kind like we have today. And so the idea that we didn't simply have to take whatever discrimination we were dealing with, but that we could fight back and we could persuade people to see our side of the story and support us was very motivating. But certainly back at that time, I didn't really know much, about. Anyway, so I could not have predicted it. But isn't it amazing to see this footage where she's trying to figure out what we're going to do for dinner on the cook's night out, and how that relates to how the early moments of the sit-in in San Francisco, and how it was making sure that everybody was heard, that everybody was considered. And I miss her.
What do you perceive are the biggest obstacles to disability rights today?
The EDA was an unfunded mandate. And it's really, I don't know of other civil rights legislation in which people have to sue to get them enforced. And so there are attacks on this all the time in the legislature and the courts. And there's a case in front of the Supreme Court right now I won't get into, but it's just, so I think that one of the barriers is that it's tough enough as it is right now just to get up in the morning and get through your day without people trying to subjugate our human rights. On a much broader, less nuanced way of talking about this, access to healthcare is still very important that people with disabilities can't afford the care that can keep them alive or comfortable. Access to air travel, being able to travel in your wheelchair, um, is very, very important. It's affected my life negatively. I just flew for the first time, and since March of 2020, you have to be lifted into an aisle chair that is, and then you're strapped into this chair, and then there are two people kind of rolling you back to your seat. Well, I'm kind of broad shouldered, and I used to be able to sit sideways, but I can't anymore because of an injury I had. And I just remember, coming home, and it was like thwap, thwap, thwap on my shoulder, and it didn't feel good, So that's a really very important issue. Also, there's a marriage penalty if you are reliant on in-home health services. You are not allowed to have more than a certain very low amount of income or literally resources. I'm not talking money in the bank. And if two people with disabilities that rely on that get married, they can lose their benefits because their combined income or resources goes above this draconian threshold. There's a documentary that's being made right now called Patrice, and it is about this issue. They organized a symbolic wedding ceremony in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago to try to shed light on this issue. And look, we could spend another hour kind of saying what are the barriers. One other thing, that Forward Doc, this group you mentioned in my introduction, and another group called the 1 in 4 Coalition are working within Hollywood to remove the barriers and combat ableism. And I truly believe that until we are really employed in all strata of the industry, it's going to be much harder for us to be employed in general or get our stories told. And so, and our representation in regards to, we are 25% of the population, and with there maybe 2% of characters in what you see with disabilities, and how many of those are actors without disability. That's my battle line or my battlefield, and I have no worries that I will ever run out of things to do, or that these organizations will have things to do. And I mean, just by way of a very small example, Nicole and I got approached by a professor at Pepperdine University, and she's doing a panel, or proposed a panel at the American Film Market, which is a thing that happens in Los Angeles. People come in, they're trying to promote their films or whatever, and she wanted to ask about panelists for a panel she's proposing that's like representation and differently abled, and euphemisms that are steering away from the word disabled or disability are harmful. They try to skirt around somehow, and it told me all I needed to know, that this person, I don't think there's anybody with a disability that's working with her. And I'm sitting here today trying to figure out, after reaching back out to this person, because I haven't heard back from her since I kind of pointed out how wrong her title was. What do I do? What do I do? Who can I call upon? Because if this sees the light of day and it's not being supported or made in a way that accurately represents disability and the barriers to our representation in Hollywood, it'll do much more harm than good. So I'm really kind of giving you all, lay my heart on my sleeve right now, folks, because it's like I have asked for some help, and I'm still working on that because there are so many other things that I want to do let alone create. And like all of us who like start these organizations like Forward Doc, we all are working professionals. And so we're trying to raise money now to hire a full-time executive director, because there's only so much you can do in a day. And if your disability cuts down on quote unquote some normal resilience, there's only so much places like Forward Doc or 1 in 4 can do. I think I rolled onto this soapbox somewhere here, but I guess, I'm not going to apologize for being who I am.
No, we're here for it.
Okay.
Thank you. So we have about 20 minutes, and we want to open it up now to the audience. If you want to type a question in the chat.
And I do see Richard over there with his hand up.
Yeah. Hi, Jim. I don't know if you remember me. I used to occupy a space next to you in the fantasy building.
Well, I saw your name and I said, could that possibly be you?
Rick,
So,
yeah.
Hi, Richard. Hi. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And I'm glad to open this up, because when I saw the documentary, I was amazed. First of all, you are legendary in the Berkeley community, documentary community for sound. And then I saw you cross over and become a documentary maker. And I worked with Bonnie Burt on Strong Love, which was a documentary she did about 2 people who wanted to get married, but they had Down syndrome. And but anyway, as far as your documentary, it's risen to the top of my favorite documentary lists. And I'm wondering, now that you've kind of found out that you can do the other side of documentary making and get nominated for an Academy Award, you've really risen so do you have anything else coming up, and what can we look forward to, as far as you've worked on maybe over 100 documentaries with sound?
Probably close to 200.
Yeah.
Over that career. I'm doing a lot of different things. I've had some opportunities come to me. Is that I'm an executive producer on a reality show that's in development that's all about travel and disability, and it's based on a show out of Channel 4 in the UK called Mission Accessible. So this will have a lot of humor, and anyway, and we're in development with a streamer, so fingers crossed. I'm also an executive producer on 2 documentaries, and one of them is about childhood trauma, working with an editor.
I think we lost you again.
Anyway, I'm an executive documentary about childhood liked a lot, and another one about a kid who lives in Amherst, Massachusetts, with a disability. He's 12 years old. His name is Oliver, and he's got Pfeiffer syndrome, and he wants to make a murder mystery. And the filmmaker Cynthia is best known for Bully, and she's known Oliver and his family. She's known Oliver's mom since they were 10. And it's just like Oliver's like the kid I wish I was friends with, or I just look up to this guy. He's so creative, so funny. So I think it's going to be a big game changer when this film is seen, because representation of children with disabilities, especially, we don't see a lot.
What's that one called?
Well, its title is Kids Like Me. I don't know if they have a website up or not, but Cynthia Lowen and her husband John are making this film, and I have joy every time I work on this thing, which is really freaking rare. And and just because you asked, also I have 2 episodic television projects I've been involved with my writing partner Holly for a long time, and we still are trying to find someone who wants to take either one of these things on.
Great. Well, it's great to see you again.
You too, Richard. It's Rick, right? I mean, you go by Rick.
It's Rick. Yeah, it's Rick.
Yeah, that's what
but I'm an instructor at DVC now, so I'm Richard.
Oh yeah. Good.
We had a couple questions in the chat. The first one is from David Haggerty. What effects if any, do you think Crip Camp has had on the national view or treatment of disability?
I think it's had a pretty good positive impact because so many people have seen the film and the subjects that are discussed are really compelling. Certainly in the movie film industry, we've heard of a Crip Camp effect, where all of a sudden it's like we broke down some doors of resistance, and people are getting their projects. They're actually able to make their pitches, and things are getting produced, and it really just comes down to, gosh, authentic filmmaking. How about that? Crip Camp, like today, UC Berkeley has every year one book or film or whatever that they ask the incoming fresh people. I don't like to say freshmen to watch, and it was Crip Camp. And so Nicole and I were there for a screening and a Q&A. Judy and I used to talk to the incoming class at UCLA's med school. They watched Crip Camp and then talk to us. I did it this year with a doctor with a disability who's a wonderful pediatrician from the East Coast. So it's being used as a tool for education, and so all over the world.
Right. And Leah has a question in the chat. I'll just go ahead and read it. How can I get more involved in disability justice and meet more people in the disability community? I've tried looking around near me in the Bay Area, but I just don't know where to look or where to start.
Great question. Well, if you are online, I mean, I've had success in knowing about other people through Twitter and Facebook, and searching on the hashtag of disability justice may be a start. Stacy passed away shortly after we started our impact campaign. But there are, and I for whatever reason, I can't really quite give you a name of someone to like try to follow or get a hold of. But Stacy has started this thing called the Disability Justice Culture Club, and I don't know whether they're active, but there are people, Leah Lakshmi, and I'm sorry I can't recall exactly her last name. So Leah, if you need help beyond this, people have got my email address is jim@cripcamp.com, and I'm happy to try to at least introduce you to someone or lead you to someplace.
Thank you. And I hope it's okay with you. I put that in the chat as well, jim@cripcamp.com.
Yeah. I just have to say that there are times where I can't answer emails or that I get bogged down so far. So just know it doesn't mean that I don't care. It's that I'm really struggling right now just to what is the term I'm trying to organize my life better so that it's I can be better at what I do and not like drop balls or not respond to folks. And I've been really like looking at this because I have this opportunity with this visibility and these organizations to leverage what began for me with Crip Camp to help the disability community, and knowing the pain of living with it for 67 years and the horrible experiences virtually everyone with a disability has experienced. It's like I want to be like on the front lines. I want to anyway. I'm being just really freaking open today, so I feel really like this is a safe space. But I also think that it's very important for people to display for others how they deal with mental health issues, how they deal with their disabilities. And the whole concept of disability pride was like, what the hell is that when I first heard it? But I think that it's important for when we are able to talk about these things in public, it enables other people to maybe live less in the closet about their own situations. And no one wants to not live their organically authentic self. But especially if you have a hidden disability, the stigma of disability is really so tough that so many people, just by way of survival, feel like they have to hide this. And so, when Simone Biles was really, really public about the fact that she took a break from gymnastics for her own mental health and has talked about it, that sets an example for everybody else in the playground. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. So, and I think that was my and a lot of other people in Crip Camp that you see. Denise talking about her appendectomy, me talking about the fact that I had a urinary tract diversion when I was 15. I don't really care that people kind of know how I pee, but yet for me, it was important, and for Nicole and all of us, that we try not to leave anything in the dressing room for this opportunity to have an audience. And certainly it's not for, oh, well, I want to date Jim because he's got a bag. It's more, I have a buddy from college, and he almost died recently, and now is going to have a colostomy. And he remembers me having my urostomy. And Rob and I aren't in touch that often, but when I heard that he was ill, I try to talk to him every other day. And I know that from his wife that my calling him is really giving him the kind of support that he needs. So I think that's a tangent, but anyway.
Thank you. And we so appreciate, you feeling that this is a safe space and just being open. I think that's lovely. Jason did put in the chat too, which some other folks have been responding. So thank you. Are there any other books or other media you'd recommend for further reading about disability?
Well, Alice, so I mentioned Alice has a couple of different books, including her memoir. Judy has her memoir. So I'm unbelievably reading a book, Drew Leyland's book, In the Country of the Blind, and it's his kind of memoir of losing his sight. And I'm listening to the audiobook, and it's just like, it's really, 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 really good. So just say, if you're able to find the Disability Futures Fellowship online, and I'm certain there's a website, and look at the people that are part of the cohort. I'm part of that the first cohort, and we've anyway. There's just a ton of really great people there, and I think that these are the people to try to go and get information from. One of the first books I read was No Pity, which was written many, many years ago, but really talked about disability rights. And so anyway, I would just totally start there. And occasionally Amazon does a good job. If you click on one book, it refers you to other books on disability studies or disability as culture. And Kia Brown is someone who's been writing, who's a woman with cerebral palsy, who's a woman of color. So, yeah, I got a bookshelf full of books that I've either half read or will try to get to before I expire.
And thank you, Irene, and everyone for putting these links in the chat. This is great. We have plenty of reading ahead of us. It's wonderful.
I could talk a little bit about films.
Oh, yes, please.
Oh. I'm actually imitating a character from a TV show from the 50s. That's how freaking old I am. There's a documentary that's going to be on PBS's POV the day before Halloween, and it's called Fire Through Dry Grass. They just won Best Documentary Award at the Black Star Film Festival. It is about a community of people that live at Kohler Rehab Hospital on Roosevelt Island in New York, and what happened when COVID hit and they started moving COVID patients into their facility. And it's a great documentary. Anybody that's living in the Bay Area, screening at the Roxy coming up in a week or so. But these people of this, they have a group called the Reality Poets. They started filming with their phones. They hooked up with a documentary filmmaker. They started, using GoPros, and they basically brought down the administration of Kohler and started a nursing home matter movement. And anyway, and Vince, who, anyway, it's a great story about, again, like saying, we're not going to take this crap. And in fact, you're killing us. And we need to react and make as much noise as we can. And to see this story and this movement led by all of these people of color, also, I think is very, very important for people to see. And the fact these people live in a nursing home or a rehab center is very important for people to see, because it destroys negative stereotypes.
David Haggerty asks, do you see a change in the way people with disabilities are being portrayed in recent mainstream films such as Coda?
So I don't think, there's two issues. There's like just who the characters are and what the stories are versus who are the actors that are playing these roles of people with disabilities. And in that regard, there's still work to be done, because we call it cripping up, but however, Peter Dinklage has a brand new film out that I'm hearing great things about. And so I'm, and that man, he's a great actor, and he's worked so freaking hard for his career. And so it's people like him that I really appreciate. I'll also say just that I've been a judge for the Easter Seals Film Challenge, which happens every year. It's like one of these like 24-hour or 48-hour film challenges, or maybe it's longer than that, but nonetheless, they have a channel on YouTube, and particularly one film called Rain in My Head won for Best Picture this last round, and it's a wonderful 5-minute narrative about these two deaf women, and that's like really just that doesn't even begin to describe it, but I freaking love it. So anyway, that's something in the future. A lot of us are out there working hard to change the perception of disability.
Thank you so much. And the wealth of resources that have just come out of this talk too, things that we can explore, watch, read, talk about, it's just really amazing. And I don't think there's any other questions here. Hannah wants you to know she's so grateful for this hour that we spent together. Thank you for your thoughts, and to DVC. Thank you, Hannah. My apologies. I want to again extend my thank you to Jim LeBrecht on behalf of all of us for your time, for your advocacy, for your amazing artistic work, and probably not putting that very well. I'll think of a better thing to say later, but I appreciate you so much. And I'm sure we all do as well. That concludes our session. So thank you so much all for being here. This has been really a wonderful experience.
Well, thank you very much. I had a great time today, and keep going. Yeah, there you go. See y'all. Bye-bye.